Scott, I want you to hear just a little clip by Jean Charest, who did the rounds today, I think, on American TV and Canadian TV to talk about the Trump tariffs from yesterday. There was one part of what he said today in an interview on CTV National News that I want you to hear when he said this.
We are in a world of only bad choices, and all of this wasn't necessary. All of this could have been avoided. It wasn't, we did not ask for this fight. So now Canada is faced with bad choices, and the Prime Minister, I think, is trying to do the best he can.
All right, give me your take on that. We are in a world of only bad choices. The reference, I guess, being that we can retaliate, or we can do as some countries are suggesting now, try to negotiate. What do you think?
Well, he's exactly right. Like, I often say to people when it comes to, issues management, crisis management, that kind of thing, which is what I do for a living with people. And when you find yourself in a problem, it's very rare that the choice is between the good thing and the bad thing. It's between crummy and fatal. And so crummy looks pretty good when the alternative is fatal. And right now we're in a situation where we have someone who's hell-bent and determined to upend the global economy, like literally upend the global economy. And you're reminded of how much damage one person can do if that person is sufficiently empowered, sufficiently deranged, and sufficiently determined. So what are our choices? Our choices are to lay down and look weak, and we know how Donald Trump treats those who are weak, or we can push back. And I would argue that the lesson of the past 3 months has been that a forceful response, sensible but forceful, has produced better results than the alternative. And it's not like we're in a great place, but there are no great places in Donald Trump's vision. At least we're in a better place than many others. So have these targeted retaliatory tariffs, push back on them, hold a couple of cards in your hand, like energy, and let's see if the world beats the living hell out of them, and that eases them off this entire approach.
Well, so let me go all the way back to Doug Ford and that threat of cutting off or raising the surcharge on hydro rates to the U.S. by 25%. That was on the table for all of one day before it wasn't. Is it time, do you think, to go back to that, or is that too extreme?
Not today. My counsel, look, the emotion in me, yes. Like emotionally, like hothead Scott Reid would say, let's hit him with everything we have, right? Let's blast him with both barrels. Let's punch him between the eyes. But if I was being rational, if I still work for the Prime Minister, I would be forced to say, let's not go there. Let's make them feel some pain. Let's keep it a bit targeted, and then let's see how things unfold, given that the market dropped 1,500 points on the Dow, given that that China, Japan, Korea, the Economic Union of Europe, they're all going to come at them with both barrels, and let's just sort of see how things unfold. And if we need to, we have the ability to escalate. I believe that, very strongly, that Ford's threat forced an immediate retrenchment. Donald Trump, for a guy who talks tough, he's got the weakest chin you've ever seen. He can't take criticism. He can't take pain. And so when Ford threatened that, you saw an immediate reaction in a bunch of those northern states that rely on our electricity out of Ontario. And I think that it set the tone. And that's, to me, the lesson is deal through strength when it comes to Trump, because those who deal with weakness lose.
I will point out, by the way, to people who weren't paying attention, with all the markets down today, you mentioned NASDAQ, everything was down, right? S&P was down, the Dow was down. They estimate over $2.4 trillion of value was wiped out of markets today. So if Donald Trump doesn't take criticism really well, and I can think back to the first term, Scott, when Trump used to get out there and gloat about how well markets were doing, he's got to be looking at what's going on.
Well, I'll make two predictions for you. One, I predict that ultimately, and I don't know if ultimately it's going to take 3 months or 6 months, but ultimately he'll retreat on this entire project. Second, I predict quicker than that, Lutnick will get fired. Donald Trump can't take criticism, so someone has to be at fault. Initially, he will refuse to say strategy is wrong. He'll say it's been implemented incorrectly. So Lutnick will take the fault for that. He'll be gone in 3 weeks. He'll take the bullet. That'll be the consequence if markets don't reverse and if business confidence doesn't rise. But then eventually he'll cave on this approach. Now there'll be a lot of damage done between then and now, and there'll be a lot of pain inflicted on Canada and others. But I think that's how that will unfold. And today he tried to talk tough. Like he talked about, well, you know what? When you perform surgery, it hurts at first, but then you heal and you're stronger. That's, very Confucian for Donald Trump. He's not the kind of guy who shows patience for healing and getting stronger. So he gets a few more days of this pain. He ain't going to like it. And wait till China and Japan and India turn their guns and they figure out where they can hit them hard. This thing's a mess, but he may tip the world into a global recession in the meantime.
And with respect to Mark Carney, the announcement today about the 20% or 25% auto tariffs now being, of course, applied against the U.S., what was your take on that?
I thought it was kind of classic Mark Carney. We haven't had a lot of Mark Carney. We've only had like 2 months of the guy or whatever it's been, like a few weeks as prime minister. But it already feels kind of like classic Mark Carney. Like it was very measured. It was kind of thoughtful. It satisfied the desire to punch back, but it wasn't so inflammatory that you thought, wait a second, are we going too far? Are we acting a little reckless here? So it just seemed, this is why I think the guys soared in the polls, right? It sort of seemed like it fit the moment, seemed like it was tailor-made and for the situation we're in. So, I thought it was sensible, and almost all the, premiers and business leaders and others sort of fell in behind quickly. Now, Danielle Smith continues to be an outlier. But, and I look at Francois Legault, like I was, or Ford, pretty strong support coming from people who are not inclined to help them out in the middle of an election.
I would just ask the one thing. I don't know if it's fair to ask or not. You mentioned about support. We know the polls, and they continue to show the same thing, the Liberal strength. You think today he helped himself with, to reference what you said, he sounded prime ministerial, didn't he?
Yeah, but you're I'm going to say what you didn't, because it's such an awkward conversation. You hate to talk about the crass and greasy politics of a crisis, because by definition, a crisis means that people are in pain or people are at risk or people might be suffering. And so you go like, oh, well, is it good for Carney? Like, is all this badness good for him? And, the truth of the matter is that no one wants to see this. So thank God yesterday wasn't even worse. Thank God he didn't apply a 10% across the board on Canada. Thank God he didn't, go with higher reciprocal tariffs on a bunch of our sectors. But I think the truth is that this challenge is unstoppable, and Carney's calm, collected, competent ability to receive it and to provide reassurance to people, I think that's just, I think that is why he is where he is. And I think as a consequence, days like today are really hard for an opposition leader, because Carney is and must be the prime minister in a moment like this. All right. And that, by definition, pushes them to the margins.
Scott, always appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks.